Hi there, Rick Hansen here. Amazing Greats continues our ongoing podcast series featuring interviews with successful authors, athletes, actors, musicians, and business leaders, all who share their powerful career and life stories and how their faith has impacted it. This time around, we get up close and personal with author Jonathan Catherman, a sociologist, an educator who has spent his life on a mission to help young people prepare for adulthood and to help parents to guide them through that process. So, we've got so much to cover, so little time. Let's get started. Today, we have the pleasure of talking with Jonathan Catherman. Jonathan has written many books, but this is a big time right this moment. And luckily, we got you on our podcast to talk about this moment because you've just launched another book. And isn't it kind of like having a baby? I mean, this is like, you've been working on it for 9 months and then it's birth time, right? So
it is. My wife, Erica, and I were joking about how we were going to do some of the marketing for this new book. I said, let's just do something that says we've decided to have a third. And we look at this a book, because she and I have co-authored 2 books prior to Raising Them Ready, which is our third co-authored work. So yeah, it's a lot like having a baby. It's a lot like that.
Yeah, and now it just was launched here on the 1st of March. We're just about to approach the 1st of April. So you are, do you have any sense of how it's going so far?
Yeah, well, you know, it actually came out on March 22nd. So we're not even at a week. We're at day 6.
Oh.
And yeah, it's fun to watch the daily reports of book sales. And I can tell when people are getting off work and buying books, or if they're bored at lunch and buying books. And so it updates every hour. So far, very well. We're very pleased. And we'll just keep watching that trajectory, because this is one of those longevity books. This isn't the flash in the pan sales. This is going for the long term.
It's kind of it's a manual, really. Just before we get too far into it, I want to kind of give the resume of Jonathan Catherman as best I can here. You're talking about this book, which is called Raising Them Ready, but you've written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other books, including The Girl's Guide to Middle School, The Girl's Guide to Conquering Life, The Manual to Middle School, The Manual to Manhood, Becoming the Next Great Generation, Guiding the Next Great Generation, and then this book, which, as you said, just launched on March 22nd. So not only that, but you're the founder of an organization called 1 Million Mentoring Foundation. I want to talk a little bit about that today, too. You got the President's Volunteer Service Award recipient in 2018, the MLK Drum Major for Service Award recipient in 2015. You kind of, let's face it, are the parenting new generation guru. And that's why it's exciting to have you on the show to kind of tell us all about that and fill us in on the book. So let's start with that. The book is, from what I've read, I just got the book. It came out the 22nd. I just got it Friday. I slammed through it all weekend long. It's practical. I mean, really nuts and bolts. And here's what you do to be successful. Tell us a little bit about how all that came together and what the process is for being a good parent.
Sure. Well, Eric and I decided up front real early that we knew how to make a parent angry, and that is how to tell them how to raise their kids right. If anybody tells another parent how to raise their kids right, it just goes bad right away. So we did a Raising Them Ready book, and I don't think there's a parent out there that will argue with how we are to raise our kids ready. And we have kind of on our nightstands 2 types of parenting books. One is so meaty, thick, you feel like you've bitten off more than you can chew, and you need a PhD to understand, about every other sentence. And or they're so candy shell thin, there's no nutritional value in parenting resources. So we aimed for a book that would take the sociology of my career, an understanding of childhood developmental phases and stages, what we know about parenting and what's working in this new era of raising up kids today versus when we were growing up and being raised. And we just said, let's do something that any parent with a child between the age of 2 and 22, whether they're they're parenting together, or they're single parenting, they're step parenting. Maybe it's a grandparent parenting their kids, aunts and uncles who are joining in the parenting process, adoptive parents. It doesn't matter what kind of parent you are. This is just practical resources for raising your kids ready, preparing them for life on their own.
What's wonderful about it is so, I mean, it really is specific. I mean, you're talking about practical things at certain ages that parents can do to, for example, teach responsibility.
Yep.
You know, when you got into talking about how you can teach the kids to water the plant, I thought, oh boy, this is about just about everything you'd ever need to know, right? And so so what you the basics are, you know, it's mindset, skill set, and tool set, right?
Right.
So how does give us a capsule of what that's all about?
Sure. So when we're raising our kids ready, we're looking at how are they willing and able to take on the demands of life? And parents need to understand the demands of life are little things like getting out of bed on your own with, to an alarm clock when you're, a teenager, to brushing your teeth in the morning, to as they get older, everything from getting their driver's license to passing a test. Anytime you're facing something that's requires a specific response or specific action, that would be considered demand. So here's one that all parents understand all too well. When they hear from the closed door bathroom, somebody bring me toilet paper. That sounds demanding because we need it right now. But knowing how to change a toilet paper roll is anything a kid under the age of 8 years old, between the ages of 3 to 4 to 8, you should be able to get that done. We have a long list of what those demands look like. But when our kids face a demand, the first thing they wrestle with is, am I willing and able to do this? Willing is mindset. Able is skill set and tool set. So in the book, Raising Them Ready, we discuss how do we help our kids develop a mindset where they are seeing the positive side of life's demands as challenges rather than the same demand as a threat. And in order to do that, you also have to have the skills and tools, because that's what helps reinforce the mindset. When the brain sees life's demands as challenges, it registers it as remarkable, let's do this, let's excel, and we thrive in a challenge state. Whereas when the brain registers same demand as a threat, because we're unwilling or unable, then we tend to perform poorly in those those spaces. We enter into fight or flight, and we just go into survival mode. We're not talking life survival, but when a kid just doesn't want to do something or ignores it or pushes back or argues, that's because they're probably not in a willing and able mindset, skill set, and tool set.
Yeah. So what age do we start working on these projects? Is there any age too young?
No, we're focusing on 2 to 22 years old. Because at age 2, a child can start putting away their toys with parents' help. They're starting to see and understand that there's responsibilities in this thing called our family. And there's no reason why a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 5, 7-year-old can't be engaging in aspects of what it takes to keep the home going without, they'll ramp up, they'll ability up, but they need to start learning young. Or you go to the other end of the spectrum, and here you've got, early 20-year-olds who really should be launching. They should be out moving into their own space, their own place. They're creating their own environments and their own lives. But yet we're seeing many of them are hovering around home into their mid-20s because it's a whole lot easier. And it's, experimenting on adulting is a safe space when we're still having our meals prepared and our laundry done and our bills paid. So we're looking to close that spectrum so that there's a developmental progression from starting at age 2 through early 20s, where when they go, we celebrate because we're excited to know that they have everything they need to succeed. And we've been doing that since they were young. Now, if we're picking up somewhere in the middle, it's okay, parents. You can pick up. It's never too late to get started. With a teenager, but the earlier you can start, the better.
Well, yeah. One of the things that I was told, even though I'm an older guy, I'm a kind of a younger parent. So I have a son that's 26 years old. So when we were raising him, we didn't have your book, so it was a lot of poking and trying and seeing if this works and if this doesn't. And one of the things that somebody told me, and they weren't an expert, but they said if the child if you haven't trained a child by the age of 14, it's all over. I mean, they've already they've already set their ways. They know what they're supposed to, and it's hard to change them at 14. Do you find that to be true? Is it harder?
It can be harder, but what we want to avoid is the belief that our kids have what's called fixed mindset. What we get, what you see is what you get. And after a certain age, you're probably not going to get much better than that. That's a parental's paradigm or perspective of a fixed mindset. Whereas a growth mindset is at any age, we're able to develop, or any age, we're able to progress, at any age, we're able to mature. And so our kids' brains, as they're developing, are just geared for growth mindset. It's often the pessimistic adult who has that fixed mindset and casts that onto their child. We want to avoid that. Our kids are amazingly resilient and very plastic in that they can grow and change and develop. And in no 2 days really are they the same person. So yeah, if they're 14 and they're kind of set in their ways, it doesn't mean they're cast that way. There's certainly room for improvement, and maturity is what we need to be looking at, because as they mature physically, that's obvious. How do we help them mature body, not just past body, but heart, mind, and soul also?
Yeah. Okay. So, as the book progresses, the kind of toward the end of the book, you talk about releasing. Can you kind of prepare for release? Is kind of how you describe it. So, how do parents prepare for letting their child go out into the world?
Sure. Well, the book, as you said, that's the last third of the book, and it's broken into thirds. Like ready is how do we get our kids ready? So there's a readiness assessment. And the second part of the book is called set, and it's what are the skill sets and tool sets kids need to succeed. And there's over 300 of them by the time they are out on their own. But then the third part of the book is go. And how do we let go of our kids? We call it the release plan. And we believe that every parent needs to have a release plan that is not focused on 18 or when they move out of the house or go to college or enlist in the military, when they're out on their own. Really, the release plan starts at all of the stages and ability levels that our kids are going through. So what we do is we do instruction, guidance, and counsel through the different stages of development in their life, but we're doing instruction and release, guidance and release, counsel and release. And as they mature, we pick up new instruction and new guidance and new counsel, but we need to be releasing the kids in between each phase and stage so they can take on that ownership. One of the best, simplest examples I can give is like when we're teaching a child how to ride a bike. So maybe when they were little kids, they got on into the caddy behind our bike. So they've been on bike rides, they've just been towed in the caddy behind. Or they saw parents riding bikes, and then now they want to ride bikes. They see the big kids ride bikes. They're observing riding bikes. And then it's their turn. So we get them the scooter, we get them the tricycle, we get them the training wheels. And they're learning how to do that. They're getting instruction. This is how you pedal. This is how you steer. This is how you brake. This is our role as parents, right?
Yeah.
And then we hold on to the back of the seat. We run alongside of them, telling them they're doing great and they can do it. And we know they can. And then at one point, we let go of the seat. And there's no training wheels. And they go down the walk, down the park, down the street, all on their own, wobbling and way, and for sure they're going to crash at some point. That's part of the learning process. But my kids are now teenagers. And if they say, hey, I'm going to go on a bike ride on my mountain bike and going over to the mountain bike park, I don't run alongside of them holding the seat because they're perfectly capable. They've proven themselves since they were little. They've gotten better and better and better. And now they load up their bikes and they go off to the mountain bike park, and we just hear about it when they come back.
Yeah.
That would be the example of when we give them instruction, guidance, and counsel, but we release them to go do that. So pick any one of the number of life skills and character traits our children are developing. Once we've done well in giving them instruction, guidance, and counsel, we're releasing them, we can move on to the next instruction, guidance, counsel, and release, and the next. So that when they're old enough, we're hands off. And they have already demonstrated themselves to be successful in the little, because those who can be good stewards of little can learn to be good stewards of much, and off into the world they go.
And your son Reed, who was ready for launch to go off to college, it turns out that there was a wrench in the works on that one because of pandemic, right? Yeah. So that changed things. So he was ready, you were ready, but it didn't launch. How did that work for you?
Well, it's like when you go to countdown 3, 2, 1, and you're not allowed to press the button, right? So there's the rocket just sits there like, come on, and so our son Reed, he spent the first 2 years of his college, because of the pandemic, not being able to go to the university campus and to move on to campus. So we called it the dorm room over the garage. He did virtual university in the dorm room over the garage. But we still tried to treat him like a college student, allow him to have his life experiences. Like, we stopped hovering. Well, we stopped hovering a long time ago, but we made sure we didn't hover and ask, what time's your class? Or did you need any help with your homework or your paper? Things we might have asked him maybe when he was in high school or when he was in middle school, but he's still here. And we had to say, as parents, allow him to have a college experience to the best of his abilities. And doing his own laundry, we wouldn't have gone to college and done his laundry. That's his responsibility. So you know what? When supply and demand requires the demand for laundry to be done, because the supply is running low, he knows where the laundry room is. And we even didn't require him to come to many meals, because he had other things he was interested in doing around the same time we were planning on having dinner. If he were at college, we wouldn't require him to have dinner with us at 6:30 anyway. Yeah. So if he had other plans, we had to respect that. Yeah. We practiced him being away the best we could here, but the pandemic is what the pandemic is, and so we did. On
that, I know you're not a foreseer of the future, nor is anyone. But how do you think the pandemic might have impacted this new generation, both educationally and socially? You think it's something that's going to just go away and it'll all be fine, or do you think there's going to be some long-term impact?
I think that there's going to be some calibration we need to consider. And I just did a talk this weekend with a group of leadership teams, and we were talking about the five changes the pandemic forced on them. And they include changes in the roles, rules, relationships, rituals, and routines of their life. And because of those 5 changes that were demanded of them, they couldn't avoid them. There's just no avoiding. And really, we can handle about one of those at a time in our life anyway. But when you have all 5 of them pressing in around you, that's a heavy burden to bear. And I think that we aren't going to have the things the way they used to be. And we've got parents and educators and adults need to recognize and just acknowledge that. You don't have to like it. It's just the way it's going to be, though. They aren't going to be back to the way they used to be with our younger generation.
Interesting.
But how do we help them calibrate for where they are? We can't take them back in time, and we can't force the toothpaste back in the tube, but we can meet them where they are and help guide them to their fullest potential in a new way. We have to set aside our expected ways that we used to do it this way and say, all right, now what do we need to do to get them where they need to go next?
Gen Z, as they're called, is, some older adults look at this as the generation of rap music, the generation of video games, the generation of social media, streaming, bullying. But you have a different perspective on this generation than all of that. Tell us what your thoughts are about this generation that we're now seeing growing into adulthood.
Sure. I see this emerging generation as the potential to be to be the next great generation, to do more good in this world than any generation before. Now, I say that to adult audiences, and I can hear half of the audience's eyes roll, and I can see the other half of the audiences nod their head up and down. So it's almost like this 50-50 split. Some see great potential, some think it's just a train wreck waiting to happen. And I'll go back to, in the books I wrote, Guiding and Becoming the Next Great Generations. Guiding the Next Great Generation is written for adults. Becoming the Next Great Generation is written for young people. But they're the same book, just languaged differently. And I believe that the young people we're developing into adults today who will be our leaders, not just of tomorrow, but they're also leading in many ways today also. They need to learn how to bridge the gap between the generations, transform raw talents into valued strengths, practice stewardship before leadership, and how to live with purpose. But it would be inefficient and ineffective if they did that as through experiment. They need to be guided in that process. And so as parents and as adults and as mentors and as educators, we need to guide them in bridging the gap between the generations. And the way that they're willing to build towards us, we have to build towards them. We don't have to say, come meet us here, or we'll meet you there. We need to meet in the middle. And their expectations of what leadership looks like is different than the way we grew up. When we grew up, it was leaders over followers. Now that's a 2-layer model. They see now as a 3-layer model, and it starts actually from the bottom as its value. Entrance is membership, and then stewardship, and then leadership. The emerging generation, young people today, do not want leaders who are not good stewards. But in order to be a good steward, you need to enter into the group. That's membership. So practice stewardship before leadership. And then to transform raw talent to valued strengths. I think that these kids have more potential to do good in the world because they can take their talent and transform it into a strength in ways that we really had to work a whole lot harder on when we were growing up. They have genius in the palm of their hand. You know, it's these devices right here. We call them cell phones, but the reality is this isn't a phone at all. It's a pocket-sized computer with a phone app.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So that being the case, if they have a question, they don't have to go to a library and navigate the Dewey Decimal System and page through resources and then check it out and then study it. They can literally Google search something and have the same information it would have taken us hours to find. And then the purpose thing, they desire to live with purpose. Rick Warren's book, Purpose Driven Life, has just sold millions and millions of copies to adults and to young people, but mainly to adults because we're driven by our desire for purpose. But young people today, they're looking for it at a younger age. They want to have meaning, to see and be seen, to know and be known, to love and be loved. So I think that they have amazing amount of potential. Those people, here's what I heard the saying not long ago, says, those who say something can't be done are usually standing in the way of the people who are trying to do it.
Yeah, that's so true.
My message to your listeners, your viewers, is if they don't think this generation has potential, then please get out of the way of the people who
Hear, hear. That's great. I brought that up and bring that up because I had one of our guests on our podcast, Isaiah Lacombe, who is a young man just entering college right now, but is already, as a teenager, has raised thousands of dollars for clean water in Rwanda. They've built health clinics. They now have it's a group of young people that work with World Vision that have projects, and they're just launching a new project. It's called, trying to come up with the name of it. It's a literacy project to raise funds to enhance literacy in Rwanda and in the United States. And they anticipate, a $50,000 goal, but I think they'll get there and a whole lot farther just because they're driven. They're purpose-driven young people.
They are purpose-driven. Our youngest son, who's 18, just quit a job that paid well, and he really enjoyed the people he worked with, but he took on a new position in a new company. So he'll be making tourniquets for Ukrainian soldiers.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he came home and said, I am doing something good. I mean, what a horrible need. It's a terrible need to have,
Yeah, yeah.
But he says, I don't want to work in a restaurant anymore. I'll give up some of the benefits of there to do something good with my work. And we're just like, wow. As parents, we're like, moved, absolutely moved.
Yeah. So as you know, this is a Christian-based, faith-based podcast, and so I don't want to get away from all of this without integrating how does Christianity, if you're in a Christian home, how do you build that same kind of mentality with your young people in their Christian lives, in their faith lives? You come from a family of faith, so with all of the things that you've talked about in the book, where does someone's faith enter into that?
Well, think of the scripture says, raise a child up in the ways they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. I think it's very interesting. It says, raise a child up in the ways they should go. And then it skips to, and when they're old.
Yeah.
There's this middle part, though, where we have to determine that the faith that we follow is ours and not an assignment. So in the context of as a Christ follower, how do we raise our children up so that when they were old, in the ways they should go, so that when they're old, will not depart from it? That means we as parents need to be consistent in the modeling we show our kids, because they're also very tuned into the context of hypocrisy. Don't say you're going to do one thing and then do another, or don't say one thing and then not follow through, or don't put on a two-faced life. So easy to do these days with our social media. We can present anything we want, but the reality is known at home. So as parents, and as professionals, and as mentors, and as friends who are the model, the example of young people building their faith today, they need to see in us consistency. That's the one thing that drives a lot of young people away from faith and from the church, is because they hear one thing and see another. Mm-hmm. And it hurts my heart when that occurs, because they're real quick to call it out, and you know what? They should. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not always to the benefit of their faith development.
So how did that play into your family daily life? Does the family pray together? Do they do Bible study together? Do they bring the whole concept of faith and Jesus into their daily life? How does that work?
Well, I'm a sociologist, and that's a fancy term for someone who studies how groups of people work together, right? And that includes families. So what we teach our kids at home is again, it's the first model. And so they need to see in us, in my bride Erica and myself, the consistency of prayer, the consistency of scripture, the consistency of living in a way that we are learning about and practicing. But I also think it's important that they know that practice doesn't make perfect. So our kids need to know, as we practice our faith, it doesn't make us perfect Christians. There's no such thing. There's Christ followers. We're followers of Christ, but we're not Christ, right? The only perfect measure there is Christ.
Yeah.
Period, right? We're not Christ. Christ can live in us. Christ can live through us. We can aspire to be disciples of Christ, but we will make mistakes. So part of, I think, the important thing about faith development also is to recognize that we are practicing our faith, which means you see it on a regular basis, and it's not always perfect. Mm-hmm. So let's just be real with our kids. If we're not real with our kids, they already know it. And it doesn't draw them closer in faith. It draws them further away. So be real with your kids, practice what you teach and preach, and let them see you living your faith, and then give them the opportunities to do the same in a way that's their faith development, not just a mini-me hacked off version of myself. I'm not trying to relive my faith glory days for my kids. They're faith development has got to be owned by them, not inherited from me.
Perfect. That's so good. Now, this is a question that may be more difficult to answer, but it comes from a real life experience. So what happens if both parents are, one parent is a Christian and one's just not? Is there a way to navigate that issue with family? It's a tough one, but I came from a home where my mom was a devout Catholic and my dad just wasn't. Not that he was a bad person. In fact, he was a wonderful person. But he didn't have faith. He didn't have a Christian base. So at home, it was not talked about. You know, you went to church and you went to your catechism class, but you didn't bring it home with you. So is there a way to navigate that you know of?
Again, I'm going to say today is a lot different than when we were growing up, because kids are more likely to talk about anything and everything today.
Interesting. Okay.
And they have excess access to all information. So having these open conversations in our home, and even if two people don't agree, it doesn't mean they dislike. So I can not agree with somebody, but that doesn't mean that I love them any less. So not to sound coy, but we have to let our kids develop their faith. It has to be their faith. They have to have the choice to do this or not. And I know that there's some parents that don't want to hear that. But if we don't give them the choice, the day will come where they'll make their choice. And so I would rather have all kids have the opportunity to have those open conversations at home, even if the parents disagree. But that doesn't mean the parents love each other any less or love their kids any less. But what they're telling their children is, here's the best information we have. How will you live it? What will you do with this? Because we have to, again, it goes back to instruction, guidance, and counsel, but you have to release in between. I give you instruction, best instruction I have, and then I let you decide how you're going to work with it. I will give you guidance on how to develop that, but then you're the one who has to live it. And when you need more and you seek my counsel, I will provide with you with the very best I can without the expectation of you being a version of me.
So many people that I talk to on this podcast were raised in a certain religion, drifted away, as I did, and only came back when it became real for them. Only came back to their faith when they found Jesus. It wasn't because mom and dad said, "Here, this is what you believe." It's when they had reason to believe and were, had their own, like you say, it's their own deal at that point.
Really what happened is they grew up religious and became faith. So you can't, if it's not yours, it's not faith. If it's required of you, then it's religious. If it's a choice, then it's faith. And my faith has religious structure to it. But if I'm required to do it because it's the family I grew up in, or I inherited as part of our culture, as part of that's religion. Mm-hmm. Faith, I choose.
So let's talk about you just briefly. I always love to find out the Christian story of the guest on our show, and that is, where along the way did you find faith? Where did you find Jesus? What was your upbringing and your Christian story?
I found Jesus in a train car in Italy.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, and we got in a fight. I got in a fight in an empty train car in Italy with God, and really the battle was with myself, and I was verbalizing it towards my relationship with God. I grew up in a wonderful family that was filled with faith and religion. I mean, went to church on the regular. Were very involved. I was involved in youth group. Went to trips and served internationally. There's all kinds of offerings, both locally and regionally and internationally, and was very, very involved in our church. My grandparents helped found the church. My parents met and married in the church. I eventually met and married my wife in the same church.
Really?
But at the end of my teenage years, I was overseas And the intent was I was going to be at school in Austria, and I didn't really want to go. And I got mad, and I blamed it on God, and I got into a knockdown, drag out fist fight with my seat cushion in a train car in Italy.
Really?
That
Oh,
was
no.
the manifestation of how I felt about where I was with God. And I said, I need better proof than this. And I thought it was going to be, visual sign, and I did not know it was going to be relational and emotional. And as time went on, days, weeks, months, and into years, I learned that the Lord's guidance in my life is very visual, is very relational, is very purposeful. And so I came to Christ as a young child by profession of faith, but I didn't follow Christ until I was in my teens. And I went on to become a youth pastor at 2 large churches in the Pacific Northwest. In my career, I have spoken before tens of thousands of teenagers at youth events, youth groups, church events, conferences. Again, though, I push towards, our religious upbringing is different than our faith beliefs. One is the structure, the other is the relationship. And I love where my faith is now today. As I look back at that teenager in a train car, and I go, oh man, if you only knew, if you only knew. But the only way to know is to have gone through those stages and phases. So, marrying my bride and being one in Christ and raising our kids in a way that they get to see that love manifested in our home and in our community and our world around us. I think that's the only way that we can live our faith out.
Along the way, was there a time when you said, and you can kind of pinpoint, God really was there? He really made himself known in a kind of a miraculous way? Is there any place along the line that you can point to and say, wow, that was all about God right there?
See, I'm 49, almost 50. I'm going to go about 49 or 50 years worth of stuff right there.
I was a little bit afraid of that because there's,
it's a great question. And I think sometimes you don't know how good you got it till you figure out how bad things can be. And I think that really I can find times where I say that was definitely not about God. That moment, that phase, that time was so far from what God had intended because I took a hard right or left turn off the path, that it makes seeing God's hand in life a lot easier when you recognize when God's hand is not, this is not what God had planned for you. So yeah, I can give you instances, whether it's experiences with our children or people that I've seen lives turn because of their newfound faith. Or once were lost and now are found. I could write a whole nother book on when I saw God in my life. But I think that's because I put on the glasses that when you have a time, again, where you can calibrate, it's like putting on glasses and you say, oh, wow, I now see clearly what I didn't see before. And I see God around me all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I'm waiting for that book. I want to buy that book too.
Talk to my
publisher. So, and that was my other question: is there a time when there was unanswered prayers, and I guess there are those times too where where was God, and it was clearly not God's intent. So, I won't even ask that question because I think that the answer is maybe the same. There's a few along the way, probably.
Well, you did ask the question. It's a good one. Yeah, again, I could say I don't want to be vague. I'm trying not to be generic. What I'm trying to make clear is that The scripture also says all things are permissible when all things are profitable. And I don't think God like leaves us, because the scripture's clear. I will never leave you, nor will I forsake you. I think God's standing right there going, you really don't want to be here doing this. Right? He's like a good friend. Like, God's greater than my good friend, but it'd be like a really good friend right there just saying, you sure about this? I mean, if you go, I go, but are you sure about this? There's at no point do I go, I'm going to do this, and I step out and God's like, well, I'm staying way back here, so good luck to you.
Yeah.
There's because you, I, your listeners have stories where in the midst of the darkest of moments, we turned and there's God right there. And okay, so that means God was never not right there. We just weren't looking, we weren't reaching, we weren't accepting that.
Yeah.
So God has never not been in my experience. I just have ignored God through countless experiences. And or stepped away, but only to turn around like a shadow you can't escape.
Yeah.
So we all have dark times. And if you want me to give you an example of a dark time, that's a whole nother podcast.
There's another book.
That's another book, yeah. Talk to my publisher about that.
Okay, so cool. Well, I know you have some things you got to get to, and you're talking to a lot of people everywhere in the world about the new book, and it's an exciting time for you. So I don't want to keep you too long. Quick last question: other than buying the book, how can we support Jonathan Catherman in what you're doing?
Sure. Well, on our website, it's thecathermans.com. The word the Cathermans, CATHERMANS.com. We all have some links over to our foundation. And our foundation, as you mentioned in the opening, is called the 1M Mentoring Foundation. It's our goal to provide mentoring resources to 1 million young people around the world. And currently, those resources are free. So you wouldn't be supporting us as much as if you make a commitment in your community, then you're making a difference in the lives of the next great generation. So we have men and women in the making clubs in elementary and middle schools and early high schools around the world. And it's life skills and character trait mentoring. The curriculum for men in the making and women in the making clubs is free. It's a download on our website. There's also the Manual to Manhood and the Girl's Guide to Conquering Life books that go with it, if you choose to use them. But we want to serve those who are serving. So if there's a way that we can serve you better, feel free to contact us right through our website, and we'd be happy to help.
I know you do a lot of speaking engagements as well. Are there opportunities to book you as a speaker on the website as well?
Yep, you can contact us right through the website, and we'll figure out what you're looking for and what's available, and be happy to. Just came back from a speaking engagement and heading out to another one here real shortly. So
very cool. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Thank you for sharing the information about your book, your information about Jesus, and it was just a delight to get to know you a little bit better. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate the invite, and your listeners and viewers are lucky to have you interviewing the folks that you're working with, because there's some remarkable people on your show. So thank you for inviting me and including me in that.
Thank you very much, and God bless.
He has. You too.
Wow, that's fantastic. Jonathan is a warehouse of great information and usable tools for parenting. Now, if you have a family member or friends that are enjoying a lifetime adventure of parenting right now, please share this episode. I know that they'll enjoy it and his insight. For all the information on how to buy the book, find out about the 1M Mentoring Foundation, and for booking Jonathan as a speaker, you can find all that scoop in the show notes right here. Thanks for being here. And always, God bless.